you can't come to grips with the idea of the ideal, or the idea of mental health, which is an ideal, without understanding the ground out of which these ideas emerged. You can't come to terms with it in any fundamental sense. And the thing is, if you're doing clinical psychology, for example, you have to come to terms with it in a fundamental sense, because a lot of the time when people come and see you, the reason they come and see you is because their sense of life's meaning has been shattered, and they're unable to proceed without the restoration of that meaning. So maybe their belief systems fell apart, or they face some sort of tragedy that's just blown them into pieces, and they have no idea how to orient themselves. Because life always presents an existential question, and one that we'll deal with later, which is life is difficult, and it's characterized by suffering. And because of that, there has to be a reason to stand up against that. And so the reason has to be made coherent. So you have to know, in some sense, that you're the sort of creature that can voluntarily face the tragic conditions of existence and prevail. And that's a religious presupposition, fundamentally, because it's based on, it's a hypothesis in some sense, that human beings are like that. Human beings are very weird animals, because most animals wander around on four legs, and of course, that means the armored part of their body is what shows, right? Their spine and their ribs along the back, which is pretty tough and hard. But human beings are standing up. So the most vulnerable parts of our body are broadcast straight forward. So when human beings woke up during our evolutionary, progress towards the kind of consciousness we have, when we became self-conscious, that was essentially equivalent to recognizing our naked vulnerability. The fact that we've woken up and are aware of our vulnerability is also what makes us fallen creatures. It makes us alienated from existence in a way that animals aren't. And people have been wearing clothes for a very long time. We've been wearing clothes for so long that body lice are adapted to clothing. And so it's been tens of thousands of years. So, and obviously human beings are also the only creatures that wear clothes, which is, and it's a human universal, by the way. People wear clothes everywhere, virtually everywhere that human beings have been discovered. So you cover yourself up, and that's the first indication that you're aware of your vulnerability. But you're also aware of the necessity of taking care of yourself as a separate entity, which animals don't really seem to have that notion. I mean, they get hungry and all that, but it's not obvious that they can extend the idea of hunger into the future, so that so that they're caring about times that are not here yet. Now, what happens after people become self-conscious? They cover themselves up. There's something that's more profound underneath that, which is that the idea is that the part of the human spirit that can accept death and die and resurrect itself, which means to continually transform in the face of tragedy, is the thing that's the antidote to the painful catastrophe of self-consciousness. It's a staggering idea. I mean, I've studied personality theory for a long time, and the first thing that I've discovered in relationship to this is almost all the personality theories that we have that involve movement towards a state of improved health are predicated on the idea that people transform through a process of painful transformation. It's like dissolution of part of your personality, which is painful and chaotic, and then the reconstruction of that into a more fulfilled form. And the reason that's associated with acceptance of vulnerability is, again, it's brilliant. This is why humility is a virtue from the religious perspective, is that you cannot change until you admit that you're wrong and that part of you has to go. So you have part of admitting your insufficiency is being willing to sacrifice that insufficiency, to let it go, so that something new can rise out of the ashes. And sometimes that can be your whole personality, to the degree that you're pathological in your fundamental structures, man. There may be things that you have to give up that are huge chunks of your life. So these are very interesting representations. So the man in the lotus position. Why lotus position? It's another tree metaphor. So a lotus is a very interesting plant. So what a lotus is that it grows on water. So the water's deep, and maybe the top of it's clear, but then the bottom of the water is very, very murky and deep and dark. And so it represents the dark elements, say, of the unconscious mind or the unknown that we aren't privy to. And the lotus grows way down into that, and then into the soil below. And so it comes out of the darkness, the soil and the darkness, and then through the dark water, and then up into the clear light, and on the surface of the water, it blooms. And so it opens up like like a mandala, like a stained glass window on the right. It opens up like that. And in the middle of that, the Buddha sits in his triangular position, in the lotus position. And that represents enlightenment. And what the whole image represents is the coherent ordering of multiple levels of structure, all the way from the primal material up to the highest level of consciousness. And so the Buddha is like the ultimate flower of the lotus tree.